a successful career woman with a seemingly flawless life, remains unaware that she has been cursed. The film opens with the cozy, cheerful setting of a birthday celebration for a young girl named Rosario, lovingly called Rosa, the only child in her family. At just 10 years old, her small household throws a lively party, inviting neighbors along with her school friends. On the surface, everything appears perfect as the four of them share a home: Rosa, her father Oscar, her mother Elena, and her grandmother Griselda. Yet beneath that joyful atmosphere lies a painful truth that often goes unnoticed, as Elena is quietly enduring the suffering caused by her illness. Amid the vibrant celebration, Rosa seems withdrawn, unable to truly enjoy the moment. Her father notices her mood and gently tries to cheer her up, showering her with affection and even promising that all her wishes will come true someday. His words are not mere comfort, but a heartfelt vow from a devoted father to his daughter. Hearing this, Rosa gradually regains her smile, holding on to the hope that his promise will one day become real. Not long afterward, Rosa starts to realize that her grandmother has been absent for quite a while, prompting her to search for her in the bedroom. However, upon entering, she is startled by the strange scene before her. She notices numerous crawling creatures scattered around the room and spots bloodstains on one of her grandmother's garments. Confused but curious, she keeps looking, unaware that her grandmother has quietly emerged from the wardrobe, as if she had been hiding there without Rosa noticing. The situation grows even more unsettling when her grandmother suddenly appears in the room, despite not being there moments earlier. What troubles Rosa further is the sight of blood on her grandmother's hands. Instead of offering an explanation, her grandmother reacts angrily and orders Rosa to leave the room at once. As the event moves toward the closing prayer, everyone gathers together, yet Rosa's attention remains fixed on her grandmother, who continues to stare at her intensely. That piercing gaze suggests that something is being concealed, something Rosa does not yet understand. As time passes, Rosa's life undergoes a dramatic transformation as she reaches adulthood, with all the dreams she once held finally coming true. She becomes a highly successful professional, working for a major company in America, earning a substantial salary and holding a significant position, making her life appear perfect, as though everything always falls into place for her. However, behind these accomplishments, her personal life is far from ideal. Her family has long since fallen apart, her parents divorced, her mother passed away, and her bond with her father has grown distant. Her demanding career gradually pulls her away from her family, to the point where she rarely returns home and was not even present during her mother's final moments. Now, living alone in the city, Rosa enjoys the rewards of her hard work in solitude, with no one truly by her side. Then one day, during a powerful snowstorm that brings the city to a standstill and forces everyone indoors, she receives a phone call. The call does not come from her grandmother, but from the apartment management, informing her that Griselda has died in an accident and asking her to come and take care of the body. Without hesitation, Rosa decides to travel to her grandmother's apartment in another city. Although not extremely far, the journey still takes time due to the severe weather conditions. From this conversation, it becomes clear that they have all been living separate lives. Her grandmother had been living alone in the apartment with no one by her side. Her mother, Elena, had already passed away, and her father had gone on with his own life. Their relationships have grown distant due to a lack of communication, limited only to occasional phone calls. Since Rosa became consumed by her career, she rarely visited her grandmother. During the journey, Rosa contacts her father to inform him of the tragic news, and they initially plan to meet at the apartment. However, her father instead urges her not to come, insisting that he will take care of everything himself. Even so, Rosa cannot shake the feeling that she has wronged her grandmother in many ways, and that sense of guilt intensifies, pushing her to go despite everything. Even if it is already too late, she believes this is at least her final opportunity to show her love and devotion. Determined, Rosa boards a train and sets off for her grandmother's apartment. During the trip, she checks her phone and comes across an old voice message from her grandmother that she had never listened to before. Curious, she plays it, only to fall silent as she hears her grandmother's frail voice apologizing to her. At that same moment, when she casually glances behind her, Rosa thinks she spots someone in the crowd, and to her shock, it appears to be Elena, her own mother. She freezes, trying to process what she just saw, but within seconds the figure vanishes, leaving her uncertain whether it was real or simply her imagination. Eventually, Rosa arrives at the apartment building where her grandmother once lived, an old, worn-down place mostly inhabited by elderly residents. There, she is welcomed by Marty, the building's caretaker, who guides her to her grandmother's unit. He offers his condolences and briefly explains the situation, though he does not know the exact cause of death. He only discovered Rosa's grandmother already lifeless and assumes she may have died from a fall. As Rosa steps inside the apartment, she is immediately struck by an uneasy feeling. The air is damp and suffocating, and the space is cluttered and neglected, as though it has not been properly maintained for a long time. The management has already called an ambulance, which is expected to arrive soon. After showing her the room, Marty leaves Rosa alone. Standing before her grandmother's body, covered by a sheet, she is overwhelmed with remorse. The guilt weighs heavily on her, knowing she had been too consumed by her career and had neglected her grandmother, who had been living alone and clearly needed her. When Rosa finally lifts the sheet, she is horrified by what she sees. Her grandmother's face looks deeply unsettling, her eyes wide open in a disturbing expression. On top of that, Rosa notices numerous strange cuts and markings across her body, forming unfamiliar symbols. The situation becomes even more heartbreaking when she looks into the kitchen and finds it filled with rotten food, suggesting that her grandmother had been living in terrible conditions for quite some time. At that moment, she hears the sound of an ambulance arriving. She quickly opens the window and waves to signal them, but strangely, the vehicle drives past without stopping. Confused, Rosa calls for assistance, only to be told that she must wait, as the severe snowstorm has created a dangerous situation outside, with many emergencies requiring immediate attention. With no other option, she is forced to stay longer inside the apartment, alone with her grandmother's body. As she waits, Rosa tries to look around, but the atmosphere grows increasingly tense and unsettling. Suddenly, a noise behind her startles her. When she turns toward her grandmother's body, she notices something moving inside her nose. Moments later, a worm crawls out, shocking and repulsing her at the same time. Hesitantly, she attempts to pick it up with a cloth, but in that instant, a wound suddenly appears on the palm of her hand, and the worm quickly burrows into it. Even more horrifying, moments later, the same worm emerges from her ear, leaving Rosa panicked and completely confused about what is happening to her. Before she can regain her composure, she hears a knocking sound coming from behind a wardrobe. When she opens it, she discovers a goat's head hidden inside. Behind it, she notices a concealed door, tightly locked. However, before she can investigate further, another knock interrupts her, this time from the apartment's front door. Rosa opens it and is greeted by a man who introduces himself as her neighbor, Joe. He says he has come to retrieve an electric pan he had previously lent to her grandmother. But when Joe tries to step inside a bit too insistently, Rosa firmly refuses and closes the door, assuring him that she will find the item and return it later. Afterward, her curiosity only deepens regarding the strange occurrences she has witnessed. She examines her grandmother's body once more and realizes that the mysterious symbols cover nearly her entire body. She also notices a barb chain wrapped around one of her grandmother's legs, with a small key attached to it. The key immediately reminds her of the hidden door she discovered earlier. When she tries it, the key fits perfectly, unlocking the door and revealing a secret room beneath. Inside, she finds a disturbing space filled with animal bones and various bizarre objects, resembling a place used for ritualistic practices. In that hidden room, Rosa comes across a strange doll-like object. Beneath it, she notices a name inscribed, Kobayende. Yet that is not the most unsettling discovery. On the ritual altar, Rosa finds something far more disturbing, a photograph of herself as a child, along with strands of her hair and even her teeth. This revelation makes her thoughts spiral, as she begins to feel that everything in that room is somehow connected to her. At the same time, the atmosphere inside the apartment grows increasingly oppressive and terrifying, filling her with a level of fear she can no longer suppress. Without hesitating, Rosa rushes out of the apartment, leaving only a note behind so that if the ambulance arrives, they can take her grandmother's body immediately. Outside, the snowstorm continues to rage, but Rosa forces herself to keep moving, convinced that being outside is safer than remaining in that apartment. However, that decision quickly leads to something even worse. As she walks, she begins to see disturbing apparitions appearing one after another, slowly closing in on her. With no other option left, Rosa is driven back into her grandmother's apartment. Once inside, she tries to make sense of everything that has happened. Her search eventually leads her to information about the symbols, the doll, and the ritual she uncovered, pointing her toward a belief system known as Palo. Through her research, she learns that Palo is a dark spiritual practice formed from a blend of African traditions and Latin American Catholic influences, and its practitioners are called Palaros. Rosa then recalls that her grandmother had once been involved in such practices, though only now does she realize that they are tied to rituals involving dark forces. As she digs deeper, she discovers that these rituals require sacrifices and involve the use of a special iron vessel as a medium to form a pact, an object identical to the one she found in the hidden room. This vessel is believed to bind an agreement capable of granting fortune or inflicting a curse, and anyone connected to it cannot easily break free. From that moment, Rosa starts to understand that the strange events surrounding her are not random, but directly linked to the ritual her grandmother once carried out. She quickly calls her father, who is still on his way, and explains everything she has uncovered, including her fear that she has become a victim of something rooted in her grandmother's past. In her confusion, Rosa even begins to assume that her grandmother may have resented her for choosing to live with her father after the divorce, and for not being present during her mother's final moments. Despite her fear and uncertainty, Rosa ultimately decides not to run anymore, choosing instead to confront the situation and find a way to stop it. She returns to the hidden room and attempts to bring out the iron vessel. It proves difficult, as the object is heavy and she is constantly disturbed by terrifying figures that begin appearing around her. After struggling, she finally manages to carry it out. At the same time, she discovers a hidden book containing instructions for performing rituals. From the book, she learns that breaking a bond requires combining the blood of those involved inside the vessel. Though hesitant, Rosa follows the instructions, mixing her own blood with her grandmother's, hoping it will end everything. She waits, but nothing happens, until suddenly she is once again startled by a figure that appears and tries to attack her. At that same moment, her neighbor Joe returns and knocks on the door after hearing the disturbance. During their brief exchange, Joe unintentionally reveals something that makes Rosa realize the truth. Her grandmother never hated her. In fact, she loved her deeply. He mentions that he often heard her grandmother praying every night, wishing for all of Rosa's dreams to come true. From that moment on, Rosa begins to understand that what she has been experiencing is not a curse, but part of a pact meant to fulfill her desires. Shortly after, Rosa finds a note explaining the entity known as Kobayende. From it, she gradually learns that Kobayende is the entity tied to the pact, one that will appear once all conditions are met to claim its payment for what it has granted. With this realization, Rosa begins to feel that everything she has achieved is meaningless, as her success was not entirely earned through her own efforts, but influenced by a dark agreement demanding a price. She reopens the ritual book and discovers that the pact can, in fact, be undone, but only if the one who made the agreement sacrifices themselves by pouring their blood into the vessel. The problem is that her grandmother, whom she believes made the pact, is already dead. Even so, Rosa searches for another solution, and eventually comes up with a plan to lure the entity back into her grandmother's body. She begins performing the ritual, pouring her grandmother's blood into the iron vessel, mixing it with strands of her hair, and reciting the incantations written in the book in hopes of summoning the entity. Not long after, something begins to stir. The entity slowly rises from her grandmother's body before suddenly launching an attack on Rosa, knocking her unconscious. When she regains consciousness, the atmosphere feels noticeably different, and she is stunned to see her mother standing before her, as if she has returned to life. Overcome with emotion, Rosa apologizes for everything that happened in the past, especially for leaving and not being there during her mother's final moments. However, it does not take long for her to realize that this is not truly her mother, but the entity attempting to deceive her by taking the form of the person she longs for most. Refusing to be fooled, Rosa resists, and using the incantations, manages to force the entity back into her grandmother's body. This time, she succeeds. The next morning, her father arrives and finds Rosa in a weakened condition, inside the apartment. He appears unaware of the pact, only acknowledging that her grandmother had been involved in practices considered part of their family's traditions. Soon after, her grandmother's body is taken away, and everything seems to settle, as though the nightmare has finally come to an end. Trying to move forward, Rosa begins cleaning the apartment, while her father remains in the kitchen. However, when she looks at an old photograph, she notices something unsettling. There are traces of blood on her father's hands. Suspicion immediately takes hold, prompting her to search for him. She eventually finds him inside the hidden room, where the truth is finally revealed. It turns out that the one who made the pact with the entity was not her grandmother, but her father. He did it to fulfill his promise after the divorce from Elena, wanting to ensure that Rosa would always be happy and that all her dreams would come true. Her grandmother, aware of his actions, chose to bear the consequences herself, sacrificing her own well-being to shield both Rosa and her father from the direct effects. All this time she had been containing the entity, feeding it with her own blood to keep it under control. But once she died, that fragile balance was broken, and Rosa became the next target. Realizing the gravity of his actions, her father decides to make amends by sacrificing himself in Rosa's place. However, instead of resolving the situation, things spiral further out of control. The entity becomes even more aggressive, takes possession of her father's body, and begins attacking Rosa. A brutal struggle follows. Just as Rosa is about to be overwhelmed, Joe arrives to help, but tragically he becomes another victim of the chaos. With no other option left, Rosa makes a desperate final decision. She attacks her father, causing him to fall into the ritual vessel, which ultimately leads to his death. Several months later, Rosa's life appears to have returned to normal, and her career continues to thrive. Yet beneath that calm surface lies a far more disturbing truth. The entity never truly disappeared. It has now become a part of Rosa herself, proving that once such a pact is made, no one can ever truly escape it.